Yeah, we're back, friends. Still on Thursday Night Chat Live with Ambassador Dr. MacArthur F. Corsino, and we were earlier talking about the repercussions of people power, and before that, what happened, what transpired, especially with his experience as a member of the government, being an officer of the then Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So, sir, before we pause for a break, we were asking, where are we now, 30 years after? But before you answer that, sir, I think we cannot do away, and we will be remiss if we do not mention martial law, because it is really a precursor of the people power revolution. And you mentioned atrocities, plunder, and so on, which I think many people are saying now, never again. But I'd like to ask you, sir, where are we situated now, 30 years after people power? Number one, are our youth, especially so that the youth is the so-called hope of the fatherland or the motherland, are they really conscious of what people power has done to us as a country? Number two, have we forgotten what really transpired before people power? And then perhaps number three, maybe we can relate this to the forthcoming electoral exercise in May. Where are we? Where are all these happenings coming together? How can we all relate them to one another, sir?
Let me first start by saying that many of our young people today would not have the kind of knowledge of what kind of system martial law wrought in the Philippines. And so I would like to say that martial law disemboweled Philippine democracy, in fact abolished Philippine democracy. The Philippine Congress was padlocked, the Supreme Court was cowed, all the newspapers and radio stations were closed except that which belonged to a crony of Mr. Marcos. So there was no freedom of the press, no freedom of speech, no freedom of expression, and there was an atmosphere of complete subservience, obedience, and domestication. I mean, it was as if people were domesticated into a line that was just pro the Marcos regime, and in fact, the whole society was indoctrinated, and what we had was a one-party system. This is especially related to what we have now, because now we have so many political parties, but the one-party system under the Kilusang Bagong Lipunan, or KBL, was of course patterned after the authoritarian regime of Hitler, who had his Nazi party. But I would like to add by saying that the martial law years were years of rampant human rights violations. I don't know how many of our Silimanians today would be familiar with Dr. Cesar Taguba, or Reverend, I should say, Reverend Cesar Taguba, who finished his divinity degree from the Silliman Divinity School, and he was arrested and imprisoned and tortured for more than 1 year, and he was subjected to all kinds of painful physical abuse, including electric shocks, made to drink his own urine, and he was boxed and beaten, just because he stood for his principles. But his case was just one of thousands. And in fact, one of the targets of the martial law regime were the young people at the time. And
student activists.
The student activists. And I could cite one example, just one among hundreds, maybe thousands, and that is the case of Lily what was his family
Cesar,
name?
the one that you mentioned,
No,
sir?
Cesar Taguba is different.
There's another one.
There's another one, a
okay.
young student, female student of the the Pamantasan ng Manila,
Okay.
who was arrested, and then there was an attempt to rape her, gang rape her, and then she was, well, I would just say that the result was a mutilation of her body, and the burning of her lips, her mouth, and throat when she was forced to drink muriatic acid. And the reason for that was she was suspected of being a relative of a student, another student who was also suspected to be a communist youth leader in the Bicol region. So there were many, many examples of these human rights violations and tortures, which the young people of today may not know.
Yes. Because, sir, why, sir? Because these are not written about in our history books.
They are not written about in our history books, and I would like to mention one particular book because there have been many books that have been written, as you said,
yes, yes.
about martial law and
about the Marcoses themselves.
And the Marcoses.
Yes. What book is this, sir?
Like Raymond Banner, for example, who wrote about waltzing with a dictator. Then there was Seagrave, who wrote again about
Seagrave, yes.
Yes.
And then there is this Ricardo Manapat, who wrote Some Are Smarter Than Others. And then I think for today, just because we're celebrating the 30th anniversary, another journalist in the person of Raisa Espinosa Robles also launched her book, and this is on martial law, something like Never Again. Yes, sir. So please continue, sir.
I would like to mention particularly that book written by Primitivo Mijares.
Yes, The Conjugal Dictatorship.
The Conjugal Dictatorship.
Okay, sir.
This was written by Mijares, who used to be a close confidant of Marcos, who was something like a press
I think
assistant.
He was a journalist.
A journalist. And he wrote this damaging book that enumerated all the abuses, all the plunder, all the crimes that were committed by the dictatorship. And he wrote this in the United States. And there was an effort to bribe him because he was scheduled to speak at the United States Congress to testify against the Marcos regime. So there was an attempt through our Consulate General in San Francisco to prevent him from testifying by offering him something like $50,000. I think maybe 500,000. I cannot remember exactly.
A big amount.
But in a big amount. But he proceeded to testify, and then he was enticed. I don't know how it was arranged, but he was enticed by maybe false assurances and other things. He was enticed to come home. And well, to make a long story short, he was also savagely tortured. And before he was savagely tortured and killed, he was made to witness his own son being tortured. His son was about 13 or 14 years old. And his son was tortured by having his fingernails pulled out by pliers and then savagely beaten and tortured until his son died. And here he was helpless, bound, and made to watch his son being tortured. And before he himself was tortured and killed. So this was the kind of repressive regime which I would like our young people to think about.
But he was able, sir, Primitivo Mijares was able to finish the book, Conjugal Dictatorship, because it has been actually published and circulated.
Right, but I don't know if you can find a copy of that book now. I have a copy which I was able to buy in the U.S. But I don't know where you can find a copy of this book today.
But he was married to a lawyer or a member of the judiciary, sir, if I remember it correctly. And I think, sir, his body was never found or something like that.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
I cannot remember exactly,
Yes, yes,
but I think his body was never found.
Yeah.
But I would say that this is the book that should be read by all students
Yes, yes.
in the Philippines. And it will detail
Yes.
very factually
Yes.
all the wrongdoings of the Marcos regime, including the plunder. And before we go to that
Yeah.
subject about martial law,
Yes, yes.
I mean the condition,
yeah.
the situation where we are today.
where we are now,
I would like to
yes.
mention that
Yes.
when I was consul in the Philippine Embassy in Washington, D.C., under the then Ambassador Emmanuel Pelaez, we received a letter from Marcos, who was on exile in Hawaii. And this was signed by him personally. It was addressed to Corazon Aquino, but it was coursed through Allen Weinstein, who was the president of the Foundation for Democracy, Center for Democracy, and it was brought to the attention of the Philippine Embassy. And in this letter, Marcos, who was in Hawaii, promised, or rather offered an arrangement whereby he would return in a matter of weeks or $5 billion from his accounts. He could deliver them from Switzerland in exchange for certain conditions. One condition was all the cases against him and his family in the Philippines and in the United States and elsewhere would be dropped. And secondly, he would be allowed to return to the Philippines, to his home place in the Ilocos region. And he also promised that he would not interfere with the government affairs under Corazon Aquino. Now, we of course forwarded this letter to the PCGG, and I do not know what happened to that letter after that. But this will just give you an idea of that if a person could easily promise to part with 5 billion
Wow,
B,
yes.
how much did he really have? You know, there have been estimates that Marcos stole as much as 30 billions, 30 billions. And
so that's just a measly amount. He can very well afford to give up $5 billion.
If you can throw 5 billion like that, how much money do you really have?
Can you imagine? I cannot even imagine like tens of like millions or something like that.
Yeah, the book of Mijares will detail how Marcos assembled so much money, even from foreign assistance, investments, and some other manipulations of government banks and so on, so that even Imelda later on, I think in sometime in 1998, said that they once owned everything in the Philippines, and that these cronies like Lucio Tan, like Eduardo Cujuanco, like Roberto Benedicto, certain Campos and others were all trustees or frontmen of Marcos, and whatever they owned were really belonged to the Marcoses, and that included so many corporations in banking, in transportation, airlines, in mining, and on so many fields. So I just wanted to let all know that they can find this in the book of Mijares.
Mijares, yes. And I think a few other books, sir, that detail as well, no? The wealth that the Marcoses actually have amassed.
Yes. Now,
so today, sir, where are we now? Where are we now situated, sir?
First of all,
30 years after, yes.
First of all, the EDSA revolution resulted in a dramatic political infrastructure transformation, and it also resulted in a radical political succession in that Marcos was replaced suddenly by Corazon Aquino. It also resulted in a transformation of the atmosphere whereby repression and silence was now replaced by freedom to talk and freedom to advocate. But despite these stunning transformations, there never was a change in the political culture and values of our people. And among such culture would be, like for example, patron-client and patronage over merit and qualifications in appointments, in electing candidates, in all aspects of our society. And aside from that, I wonder why, despite the glorious EDSA revolution, we never came to develop that kind of national discipline, which is really required for the kind of development and progress we would want to achieve. In fact, I don't know how much time we have.
Okay lang, sir.
But in fact, I remember a seminar in Washington, D.C., when one of our visitors from the Cory government was saying that there was now a new paradigm in the political culture of the Philippines, and therefore there would be no more wrongdoing in government, and there would be more, shall we say, correct choices by the people in voting for their candidates. And another person who was visiting at that time, who was a former opposition figure by the name of Humubono Adaza,
Yeah, so from Cagayan de Oro.
from Cagayan de Oro,
Yes.
stood up and shall we say, debunk what the lady was saying by saying that political culture has not and will not change with regard to vote buying, with regard to stealing the election, with regard to trying to change the results. And I think Humubono Adaza has been right, because there has been no real political culture and values change. And of course, this kind of continuance of faulty behavior on the part of our people is really traceable to the fact that there has been no improvement in our economic situation.
Yeah.
There is widespread unemployment or underemployment. There is widespread poverty. There is a need for more food in the stomach, or
Exactly.
clothing on the back, and roof over
our heads.
over the head.
Yes.
And because of this need for
These are basic needs.
basic needs, basic necessities, therefore it is very difficult for a person
Okay.
to vote on the or to act on the basis of merit or qualifications rather than on patronage and subjective criteria, objective versus subjective criteria. And if you allow me to continue on this line,
Yes, sir.
I think the reason why our poverty has not really been alleviated and why the economic situation continues to be that bad is because of the materialistic values of our people. There is a crass materialism that has manifested itself not only among the old generation but among the young generation for what we call high-end objects like quality brand name bags, brand name shoes, brand name cars, and palatial homes,
the values
land
may be
holdings,
lost
etc.,
already.
etc.
Yeah.
Yes, in other words, there has been this continuing
Correct.
selfish, self-interest pursuit among our people, and this is because and this is related to the fact, because I have observed Cuban society and others, and I would
They live within their means, and or is,
no, it's
no,
not
no,
that.
That's yeah, Cuba naman pala, sir.
Yeah,
no?
yeah.
Oo.
You know, in Cuba,
Other
why
culture.
does the Cuban person who gets sick will not get bankrupted? Or why is it that he will not be bankrupted if his loved one dies? Or why is it that when he goes to the hospital, he does not expect to be bankrupted? And to me, the reason for that is our society has been geared towards this kind of materialistic attachment that makes the professionals like doctors, like engineers, like lawyers, architects, what have you, and sociologists, charge the maximum possible. That makes the businessman try to get the maximum profit, makes the government official get the maximum amount of money that he could steal through corruption, through bribery, through kickbacks, through overpricing, and so on. And
So I think it's like amassing more and more without being content with what you have. It's like I have this, but I
Yes.
still want to. I still crave for more. No.
right, there is something wrong with our
Yeah, the
materialistic
values, yes,
minded,
that's true. Correct.
self-serving, self-pursuing
Yes.
society.
Yes, oo.
And to me, that is traceable to the fact that we still need a real spiritual and moral transformation. Yes, EDSA happened. There was a revamp in the political infrastructure. There was a change in the leadership. There was a dismantling of the political structures that had created a one-party system, that abolished Congress and so on. But we have not translated it into a change involving real spiritual and moral transformation.
Yes. So, sir, since we're running out of time, and especially so that we'd like to also do our share of, educating especially our first-time voters as to what kind of leaders they're going to elect in May 2016, perhaps as a way of closing this particular segment or this particular episode tonight, sir. Maybe you can tell our televiewers, both the first-time voters, as well as those who have actually been voting for the past many years, as to what kind of leaders we will be electing. Because it's not only today that we're going to have this electoral exercise. We've been doing this over the years, but as you had mentioned, we still have not translated this to some spiritual or moral transformation. Sige, sir.
So I would say that in judging or evaluating or assessing all the candidates for office, whether it is president or lower, I think one of the considerations that we must pay close attention to is the cleanliness in terms of non-corruptibility of the person, that he will not steal from the government coffers. He will not try to further enrich himself. He will, in fact, serve the people and come up with some real economic measures to alleviate poverty, unemployment, and also be capable of really implementing the law. We have so many laws that need to be enforced. Why is drug trafficking so rampant when there is a law, there are laws, and so on? So there needs to be enforcement and real punishment of those who are guilty.
Yes, and you're not considering, of course, the filing of candidacy is over, sir. You have not actually considered running for public office, not now or in the future, sir?
No, because I have tried to run for public office before, long time ago.
Yeah.
And what you need is really money. If you don't have money, you better not think of that at all.
Yes.
Because the kind of society we have is that they say it's either matuwid na daan or 500, something like that.
Okay, yeah, that's a
so-
good one. Matuwid na daan or 500, can you imagine? It has now risen to 500 pesos. Before,
Yeah,
siguro,
yeah.
sir, mga 50 pesos or something. No? Yeah, but of course, that should not be how it is
Not just-
in the minds of our voters.
By the way, it's not like that only,
Yeah.
but you have to have a party machine or
Machinery.
a
Yeah, that's
organization. You should have
That's
transportation, mobility, and so
That's
on.
true. And all
Campaign
of-
materials
yeah.
and so forth.
All of this requires resources
Yes,
and money.
especially
and everything.
now when television and
Correct.
radio are
That's true. That's
used.
True. Yeah. We can go on and on, sir, but perhaps we can have another episode for in the future, not only for discussing about people power, but maybe among other things, especially that there are relevant issues of the day as well. But
Sure.
we are running out of time. So with that, Ambassador Corsino, we'd like to thank you once again for gracing our show tonight. It has truly been a very informative, especially informative episode because we're celebrating a milestone. So I hope we do not forget the benefits that we have gotten out of people power. We remember what happened many years ago, even if this may not yet have been written about, not really fully perhaps in our history books, but it is incumbent upon all of us, sir, right?
Yes.
Those of us in the academe to educate our young people of what happened in our history. So with that, Ambassador Corsino, thank you once again, sir, for gracing our show. We
Thank you,
hope
thank
to
you.
have you again in the future for some relevant topics. And please
Yes, of course.
catch the latest issue of Island News. We come out every Sunday. You can get this copy from our newsstands. So with that, once again, thank you, sir. And we'd like to say once again, thank you to our televiewers for always being with us. We hope to see you again in our future episodes in the forthcoming Thursdays. This has been Cecil Henove bidding everyone a pleasant evening.
Taking a moment, just imagining that I'm dancing with you. I'm your pole and all you're wearing is your shoes. You got soul, you know what to do to turn me on until I write a song about you. And you have your own engaging style, and you've got the knack to vivify. And you make my slacks a little tight, you may unfasten it.